we're back. Yep. Okay, it's recording again. All right, so, oh, looks kind of choppy there. Does my internet speed kind of have an issue? Okay, no, it looks like it's okay. All right, so the links I shared were related to, this is actually a year ago, and I did discuss it with the ethics class last year as well. It was kind of an interesting question because it was related to a news podcast that I had listened to around this time. It was about the report that had come out about the Tesla self-driving cars. And it's an interesting question that I think deserves, discussion amongst us. And so the question that is proposed is basically has to do with breaking safety laws on the street, breaking the street laws. Okay, so if you read it, kind of the basic premise here is what came out in a report was that there were multiple profiles. So you talked about these driving profiles, right? How aggressively the vehicle applies the automated safety features. So in terms of things like coming to a complete stop at a stop sign. I can't remember some of the other ones. But the idea was that you could have a profile that, I think if I remember correctly, Chill was obeyed all laws. Okay, so it would never go over the speed limit. It would, I don't think it would even ever pass a car on the road if the Tesla car wanted to go faster. I don't think it would ever pass a car, another car if it was going slower in front of it, things like that. Average was maybe, I can't remember directly, but there were some minor infractions that might go into, like in terms of like going 2 miles per hour or 2 kilometers per hour above the speed limit or something like that. And oh, does it say that really? Maybe I misunderstood then.
It's either this one or the other article that states that none of them are perfect, basically.
Well, there you go. Okay, which I'm sure is concerning, right? But
it's even worse.
Yeah. Yeah, so I thought it was one mode always away, but let's see. Where can you point out to where in the article says that?
I'll search through it right now.
Are you talking about this quote right here? All those behaviors? Yeah. Well, anyway, let's just talk about the gist of what it's getting at. Is so the way that this was worded, the way that this came out was, basically Tesla is programming its cars to break laws, which sounds bad, right? Which is an attack on Tesla and telling them that their product is not safe, right? But at the same time, Tesla's defense was that, but in many cases, in many places, if you obey all the laws, you could actually end up being less safe, right? Because if the Tesla self-driving car is obeying all the laws, right, and other drivers that are around on the road are not obeying all the laws, is it possible that obeying the laws could end up being less safe? That was their that was the defense, was that obeying all the laws could be less safe in certain circumstances, and so therefore Tesla was offering alternative options for how to drive, basically how to do it self-driving. So the thing I would like, and then follow that up, the other link, the other article I was put out here was that self-driving car users shouldn't be held responsible for crashes. Basically, what would happen is that if someone has a self-driving car and they get into an accident, that instead of the driver having responsibility, instead of the owner of the car having responsibility, the company, the self-driving car company, would be held liable, would be had the responsibility for that accident happening, right? So I would like to discuss here, I would like to have us discuss, you can come at it from, let's have a discussion from both of these points is, okay, one, is it reasonable? Do you think that Tesla's argument is reasonable that obeying all traffic laws could be less safe and therefore they should be allowed to program their cars to break the law? And then on the other hand, if a car breaks the law or is involved in an accident, who should be held liable? Should it be the company that programmed it to break the law, or the company that programmed it in such a way that an accident ended up happening? Not by, of course, not by fault, but should the company be held liable for not producing a product that obeyed the law or was safe, or should the owner be held liable, should be held responsible? So I'm going to put that out to you guys. What do you guys think? I'm just going to be a listener here. A listener or reader.
Sir, I think that the driver who basically activates these modes and ends up doing something illegal should not really be held responsible. But what was it called in law? If you basically have in American law, basically have I can't really remember its name. If you have a way of avoiding an accident, you have to do it, no matter how illegal it is under other circumstances. That doesn't matter. That part, the legality of it doesn't matter. So if your car is basically driving recklessly, I believe you should be capable and responsible of stopping that and taking control back to yourself. But if the car basically makes a sudden move and runs over a pedestrian, that shouldn't be the driver's fault because he wouldn't know that would happen. He didn't have the prior knowledge.
Okay, I can see that point there. Yeah. Okay. And then Barak says the
clear chance doctrine. Sorry.
I'm sorry. What's that?
The last clear chance doctrine. If you have a method of avoiding an accident or some bodily or physical harm, you have to take it. Otherwise, you will be responsible. It's law.
I see it. Yeah. So you're saying, so like there are cases where you need to break the law in order to avoid an accident. And
I mean,
so
slamming your brakes on the highway is illegal, but if you're about to run over someone that jumped into the road, you have to do it. It would be otherwise illegal. Right. What I'm saying is the legality part of it doesn't matter. What matters is avoiding the accidents. That's what matters. And you also have to be in control of your vehicle in the auto-driving, self-driving mode in Teslas. You have to be holding the steering wheel and paying attention. So the driver can't be cleared of suspicion under these circumstances.
Yeah, good points there. I'm also putting this up side by side so that we can have both articles up at the same time so you guys can know kind of the points of what we're talking about here. Yeah. So, Burak, when you say the person should be responsible because they are giving permission to the car's accident, are you talking about for the accident or for if they get a traffic fine or both? Because here's let me put this out here before I get to Shirin's comment. Let me get to a point about this, is as far as the accident is concerned, what happens if there's, and we'll get into the trolley problem, we may do the trolley problem next week to kind of piggyback off of this, but the question could be, what happens if the car has to make a decision between one accident or another accident? Like there's no, like there's a child maybe or an animal or something in the road that it's going to hit, or if it swerves, it's going to get into an accident with another car, or if it swerves this way, it's going to run into a tree or whatever, right? And so there's no, like, the car cannot avoid an accident entirely. So it's going, so, and this is one of those debatable topics too, even in terms of like how we program this car, is how to assess which of those 2 or 3 accidents is most preferred, right? And so the car has to make a decision. There's no way it can avoid the accident, right? So, what would happen in that situation? Who would be held responsible? So, yeah, so that would be a question to ask as part of that too. So Shirin, your comment for if there's a vehicle coming from the back too fast and you're stopped at a red light, it may be better to not stay at the red light, right? Not to stop, right? Of course, the car would have to see, okay, is there anybody up in the intersection, right? Right. Responsibility could be shared based on how much control the user has in the vehicle, right? Because most of these, not always, but many of them, we assume there's a way for the user to take control, right? In all the, at least in all the fictional versions of self-driving cars, there's always a way for the driver to take control, right? So if the driver did not take control when they could have, could they be held responsible? I think maybe is where you're going with that. So the auto driving feature, Barak, you're saying auto driving feature is a software given to the drivers. Tech companies provide the tools they use for disobeying the law, but don't charge the companies. So basically, if I choose to let the car drive more aggressively or assertive, as they put here, but more aggressively where it disobeys laws more frequently, that's my choice. I think is what Barak is saying. And so therefore, if something happens in that situation, I should be the one that is held responsible, right? And not the company, because the company was giving me an option, I chose to use it. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So the other Barak says Tesla is right about the coding part. If every one of the drivers in the world perfectly the rules, then the company would be wrong. Yeah. Right. So I think kind of what you're getting to is similar to what Urjan was mentioning earlier, is that sometimes you have to break the law to avoid an accident. Right. And so if we programmed our cars to always obey the law, then we could end up in a problem where there could be more accidents. Yeah, I think you are. I think that's a good point, right? Again, I'm trying to reserve my own personal judgment, because even the question about how much laws to obey or disobey could be different based upon the driving style of the city, of the state, in our case, in America's case, the state, or the country that you may be in. There are some nations. There are some nations where driving according to the law is very important and as part of the driving culture, right? But then in other countries, my experience here in Turkey would suggest that, you know, obeying all of the traffic laws all of the time isn't always the case, right? And that's even different based upon the city, right? So like we used to live in Ankara, and Ankara's driving culture is very different even from Antalya's, right? And I'd imagine Istanbul is even different from those two, right? And wherever some of you may be, if you're not here in Antalya with us, I'm sure you know that the driving culture in wherever you are could be different from those places, right? And so how do we program for that? Like, so take, for example, I think here in Turkey, the driving laws, the street laws are the same for the entire country, right? So the law is the same in Ankara and Istanbul and Antalya, right? Just how much people generally obey those laws is different from those places. But like in America, in my home country, each state can have its own separate laws, right? So how do we expect, or how do we ask our companies to be able to program for these? Should the car have GPS and know where it is and therefore what the laws are? Is that what we should require of these companies? So maybe we should look at the contract, vehicle manufacturer and the driver, and how the vehicle is presented. If the vehicle encourages the user to be too relaxed. So you mean if the contract of the manufacturer, if the manufacturer encourages, like, are you meaning encourages by even allowing these different ways of driving? Is that would be an encouragement to me to use a different mode? Is that what you mean by encourages? Oh, Barak, I missed your comment there. I am not sure. Yeah. Sure. Yes, Urjan.
Sure. I mean, in making things, I think we strive to make them safer for the general public, right? By putting labels on things with small objects inside, so children don't swallow them, or I don't know, training, workplace training videos. We intend to make things safer all around us. So I think basically putting a driving mode that doesn't always obey even common sense traffic laws is straight up wrong. I mean, it's not about a locality, a local traffic law situation. I think the articles, one of them mentions the car rolling through stoplights. I mean, nowhere in the world those stoplights are optional, right? Basically, that's a global problem. Something needs to be done about that. And driving assertively doesn't mean, basically shouldn't mean tailgating people at a dangerous, you know, distance, right? So I think we have bigger problems than just local laws and not knowing what the local law is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're saying that even some of these maneuvers, these behaviors that would be unsafe in general, just unsafe regardless of like legal or not, like tailgating, for example, you mentioned, right? That those should not be part of any programming, that those should not be part of, it doesn't matter how assertive or average or chill the car is trying to be, that certain behaviors should be completely forbidden, I think is what you're getting at there, right? Regardless of legal or not. Okay. Yeah. All right. Good point. Sure. Do you guys do any of these behaviors when you're driving?
Yes, unfortunately.
Um, let's say you have an emergency. Yeah, good question. Okay, so Barak brings up this question of if you have a friend, all right, that's injured, you need to get them to the hospital, so you put the car into assertive mode while you help your friend's bleeding, not so you help kind of slow the bleeding, so you're not driving. And who should be charged in this case for disobeying the laws? You know, the question would be, okay, so if you, let's say you didn't have a self-driving car, you were driving it yourself, and so while or let's say you had a driver, a human driver that was doing this, right? So in America, generally tickets are not given, citations like traffic fines are not given through automated, like online or cameras or anything like that. Usually a police officer stops you to give you the ticket, right? But here they get it automatically. And so my question would be, what would you do in that situation? But I don't know. I've never been in that situation here in Turkey. I've been in similar, not quite the same situations where I really needed to get somewhere. It was an emergency. I haven't done that as much here in Turkey. But let's say you're driving your car, you have your friend that's injured and someone else in the car that's stopping the bleeding, right? And you're driving them to the hospital. And the system, the automatic system, sees that you ran a stop sign or ran through a red light, or were driving too fast, or driving recklessly is the accusation, right? And you receive in the mail, you receive, whether it be through a message on your phone or through the mail from the mutar or whatever, right? That you have a traffic fine, that you have a traffic citation. Is there a way to contest that here in Turkey? Is there a way to say, go to the judge and say, hey, this is what was happening and this was why I was driving this way, and that they could waive it? Okay, so would that be a solution for your example here? So would that be a solution where the company or the owner of the car could contest the fine, say, hey, there was this emergency. The car was driving recklessly because it was trying to get me and my friend to the hospital in time to save his life. All right. And then that brings up in my mind this question. If the responsibility of the fine falls to the owner, right, the user of the car, I have a desire to prove that there was an emergency, right? Because then I won't be fined. I won't be charged for that traffic fine, right? If, however, the responsibility falls to the company, but the company has no way to prove that there was an emergency. They only have to ask, they have my response. Yeah, I need to prove that there was an emergency because I was the user, right? Is my desire to prove that there was an emergency to prevent the company from getting fined, is that lessened? Or do I have the same amount of desire to help the company not be fined? Does that make sense, my question? Yes, they can. What's the word? They can probably access the data and see that we told the car to drive assertively or aggressively, or however you want to word it, to the hospital. And so they could say, hey, they were driving assertive to the hospital. But does that prove what was going on? Does that prove it was an emergency? Or would it need something like a testimony from me saying this is what was happening? And I guess maybe could they access the hospital records in order to prove it. But then you're getting into, I don't know if you guys know HIPAA. Do you guys know HIPAA laws? And is HIPAA only an American thing? I can't remember. You guys know this HIPAA laws? They are, let's see, try to think. It's, what does it stand for? Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but basically it has to do with privacy in medicine. So if I have a medical condition that my doctor knows about it and other people that I've authorized to know about it. So like my wife would know about certain medical conditions, but my doctor is not allowed in America. Again, I don't know if this exists in other countries or not, but in America, my doctor is not allowed to release my medical information to anyone else without my permission. So it's about privacy. So would that be a problem in some countries that have these types of laws that, you know, I guess what I'm getting at is sometimes we are slow in certain situations if it doesn't directly impact us. So, you know, the company claims this person drove, we received this notification that there was a speeding fine, a traffic fine. But we looked into it, this car, it was told to drive assertively to the hospital that day, so we think there was an emergency, right? Well then, what will happen? The government, the police department will contact you as the driver. Yeah, and is there a chance we could be, I don't want to deal with this, I'm busy, I have work, I have other things I'm doing, right? Especially if it requires me to go to the police station to give a sworn testimony, a written testimony that there wasn't, and yeah, I don't want to do that, right? I'm busy, I have other things I want to do, right? Would there be a danger for that? So the authorities, those who make the legal arrangements which agree to leave the control and decision mechanism to the cars. So you're saying if the government, so like the government, like the politicians, the lawmakers, is that what you're saying? That if they decide that it's the company that's responsible, are they responsible for making the company responsible? So should we also bring them into the discussion of fining them? It's an interesting thought. Question. Are kind of a joke, I'm saying, I'm going to say that up front, but sometimes truth is in humor, is it likely that politicians would make a law where they would be held responsible, especially in incidents where they are not directly involved?
No chance of that happening whatsoever.
I just asked the question. I didn't answer it. I'll let you answer it.
I can't imagine a single country in which that would be possible, even on the table.
Me neither. I can't really imagine that happening in any country, advanced or otherwise, that happening. Yeah. So. Yeah, so this isn't a very lengthy topic, I don't think. I think we've kind of talked through a lot of the same stuff that my group last year talked with as well. It's a very interesting thing because I remember specifically the headline here was what was talked about, like the why Tesla can program its cars to break road safety laws. And initially you read that and you say, wow, that's really bad that it can break laws. But then when you hear Tesla's argument, you're like, okay, well, this may not be as bad as I initially thought. It still could be some problems, like some of these, like what was it you or John, I think, brought up this specific behaviors that are just really shouldn't be allowed, even if they're legal in some countries. Uh, so it's concerning, but at the same time, the headline may have been a little bit misleading, right? In terms of, oh, they're breaking the laws, and this is, how can you believe that Tesla is allowing their cars to break laws? So a couple of things I want to make sure that we are kind of continuing as we continue these discussions is as I have these discussions with you guys, one of the things I want you to know is that things are very rarely black and white. As we say, there's very, very rarely one way or the other, period, right? Also, one of the things I cannot stress enough, especially in the age of social media, is do not just read the headline, right? Do not just read a headline and get all of your information from that. And also be very cautious about if somebody shares something on social media where they post an article and they make a comment about the article based on the headline alone. Sometimes people will make a comment about a headline. They won't necessarily have read the entire article, or they will what we call cherry pick. They will pick specifics from the article to say this is why the company is the thing is bad or good or whatever. I encourage you to, if you find an interesting link like this, read it. Don't just comment based upon the headline, okay? Or don't just make your conclusions in your mind based on just on the headline, right? And also understand that, yeah, sometimes companies are thinking through, aspects of what I was saying earlier with the if you obey all the laws, you could be unsafe, right? But at the same time, we need to kind of be able to understand as a society, who are we going to hold accountable when bad things happen? An accident happens with a self-driving car. Is that the company's fault for programming it a certain way? Is it the user's fault for allowing it to be driven a certain way? As Shirin suggested, is it the government's fault for different aspects of whether or not the laws they put in place may have been unsafe? Things like that, right? So just some things to be thinking about, right, is as how we get to that. And or really probably what may be even true in a lot of these situations is, should we look at the individual incident, right? What was the nature of the incident? What was happening when the accident took place, right? Something like that. So like I said, I think we've kind of covered most of it. This wasn't a very in-depth, super in-depth topic, but did any of you have any further comments? Changing, updating the code or the laws? And should the Tesla cars be programmed with most up-to-date traffic laws?
Sure, I think Elon Musk commented about this, about the lack of garbage collection in old laws. I mean, the distancing laws, distance between the two cars that are going the same way, right? That's kind of distance had been set maybe 50 to 60 years ago, with cars having terrible brakes compared to nowadays. But I think that's a kind of different problem that we need to tackle than this. I mean, everything should obey the laws, right? And hopefully those laws are good. One of my my own lawyer friends had told me about this. A law should be good and it should be absolute, right? We shouldn't. We can have bad laws, right? About evil laws rather, but
Mhm.
basically we should be obeying them and then trying to change them to make them better. So I think all of these Teslas should basically follow all the laws. But if there are bad laws, that then we should tackle them altogether at a different time, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, if we require companies like Tesla or other companies that interact with the law in some way, if we require them to obey all laws, then what do we do about some of these old laws that are not necessarily not necessary anymore, or not good? So like Orjan brings up braking systems. The braking systems are much more advanced and much better than they were years and years ago. But some of our regulations and laws about tailgating are not as up to date as they used to be. All right, and so maybe a part of this, yeah, could be let's revisit the laws and let's see which ones are currently working and which ones are currently not working. Yeah, good point. So if any of you guys ever become a politician or a lawmaker, maybe you guys can work towards updating our laws to make them more logical. All right. It's a very good point at the end there. Urjan, do you have another comment?
I was just going to say if we don't become corrupted politicians, that would be possible, but not likely.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I often tell my first year students about that they are more likely to change the world not as politicians than they are as, just because I just feel like people that developed smartphones and computers are probably had more impact on the way the world works. I mean, there's a reason why people like Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs are talked about in terms of their influence on the world than most politicians and presidents, right? So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and end there for today, unless you guys have another comment or question. Thank you guys very much. I will see you in a week, and have a good week. Let's see. So I'll see you on the 27th.
See you, sir.
Görüşürüz.